But so like I guess our topic was we talked about the Holocaust, and then we each have different things and like articles from the Holocaust or like about it. And mine's talked about how like my thing was published in the 2000s. My thing talked about how like it became like the Holocaust became like a super like high focus thing, and then a bunch of countries and like different victims, like they kind of had like a victim off, like see which group could had like who was the bigger victim, and that became kind of a problem. And then there was like a convention held in Sweden, and like the Sweden like prime minister kind of like involved like the American prime minister or like president of the United States and the British prime minister, and kind of like helped to re-educate how everything was, and that like each thing was kind of like its own thing and it had its own problems, but it's not like this one should be viewed as worse because like in the end of the day, like they're all horrible. So that was kind of my mind went.
Okay. Uh, Mine was from a book, a chapter in a book called hold on, where'd it go? Historiography on the Holocaust in Poland, and the main point of it was just like figuring out how historians talked about the Holocaust like as time went on, and like this section of it, like the main thesis was that in the 80s there were a bunch of like political changes in Poland which opened up a bunch of more like resources and like evidence about the Holocaust, and it changed the whole focus from like Auschwitz being like the main like subject of all of it and like all people looked at to like a bunch of other like killing camps like in East Europe instead. Uh Mine was published in 2018, but it mostly talked about stuff that happened like in the late 90s and like the shifts and all of that after. So that's mine.
Yeah, I chose. All right, I did a book called "Coming to the Third Reich" by Richard Evans. It was produced in 2004, and it basically went over how the Nazis gained power in Germany. They talk about Hitler and other things such as like the society, politics, and like the economy that was happening during this time, and how it helped the Nazis become like super strong. They also went over like the rise and fall from Nazi Germany. It was pretty much covered everything from the birth of Hitler in 1889 to the end of World War II in Europe in 1945.
Mine was AJ, you're good. Go ahead.
You sure?
Yeah.
All right. Mine was an article called Ignored and Misunderstood Aspects of the Holocaust. And it basically just aimed to cover three topics about the Holocaust that are commonly misinterpreted. Uh, those being that the entire plan of the Holocaust was like meant to kill all of the Jews, not just those in Europe. And then the Holocaust was planned banking on the idea that the Germans would win the war, and that many of the soldiers were rewarded with medals, promotions, and other things for killing the Jews.
So mine was a chapter out of a book called The Holocaust Education, and it was written in 2020. And the main point was basically how the Holocaust is taught like nowadays, and that the students being taught about it aren't really sure of like the details of why it really happened. And like the main point to prove that the students really didn't know much about it was giving them surveys, and they used a lot of examples of them like getting basic questions wrong, like how like the population of Jews in Germany and like how many people were killed.
I guess Cade, mine and yours kind of go like hand to hand.
Yeah.
Mine talked about like, how it was in Europe, and it also talked about how like if I find this right, forgot where it was, but it was just like talking about how like people didn't really understand, and like the conference that they held in Stockholm was like a big deal at the time because it was just kind of like hey guys, like because it was talking about how everything was kind of like caught up with the Cold War, and how like people weren't really educated in like Sweden about like what even the Holocaust was, and like some people
Yeah.
didn't even believe that like it actually happened. So yeah.
Yeah, I think also so the book was written in the UK, so I think like also the point was to show that like people from like America or just other European countries aren't like they're not educated on how like the world was at the time, especially Germany. So I think it was kind of targeting like trying to prove like that only certain places know what actually happened.
Yeah, I mean,
Was his focus a bunch on like Auschwitz, like at first, and then other things, or did it cover like all of the different camps and stuff?
oh, sorry, me.
Anyone?
Oh, I mean, yeah, mine pretty much went over like the rise of power and then pretty much all the way through. So it talked about like multiple different camps and then like what took place in these camps, how like they started all the way through the end when they eventually like US came in and like freed the refugees.
Yeah. Wait, what year were all of yours written again?
2004.
Okay. Did
Mine
you have
was
any
Mine was
like old ones?
2020.
2013.
2000. Wait, what was your question, Matt?
I was like one of the main points of mine was how people viewed it like before the 90s and 80s. So I wanted to see if like that was true, but none of us had any of them written before that. So I guess it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, then the themes. I guess our themes were I think the main one's like empire and labor for mine.
One of
Mine was just like the misconceptions like that are taught nowadays, like people not knowing like what really happened and stuff like that.
Yeah.
mine also had a problem. Like mine talked about that kid, but one of my things was how like there were some new members of the European Union who were like people in the Eastern Europe who tried to say how like the uniqueness of the Holocaust was kind of like put too high on a pedestal.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I didn't say when like the title of mine, but mine was called "How Do We Remember the Armenian Genocide and the Holocaust?" It's a global view of the integrated memory of victims in third-party countries, and kind of how like it was published in 2000, and it just talked about how like other countries kind of like tried to get involved and be like, "This is worse than the other one." But yeah,
Yeah.
what about
Third question is I think for this third question we kind of just been discussing anyways.
Yeah.
One or two sources open new conversations about a topic or a specific topic. That's kind of what we've been doing already.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess we can talk about the authors. I had to look up who mine was. It was written by a guy named Dan Mitchman, and he's a Jewish historian, and he's the head of the Institute for Holocaust Research at Yad Vashem. So he definitely knows what he's talking about. I guess I wouldn't say there's any like bias, you know what I mean? Because he wasn't discussing any like brutal details or anything like that, but more just how people talked about what happened. So I think everything he said was really accurate. Like he's really qualified.
Yeah, my author was also Jewish, and I think part of his piece was to make sure that like uh the story of the Holocaust lives on, so that you can honor the people who lost their lives, but also make sure that it's not repeated again. But I also found it interesting how he tried to like understand like the German perspective also, or like what they were thinking. And he was like kind of trying to advocate for them too. So I thought that was interesting. But yeah.
What did he say about him? Like,
Well, he didn't really advocate, but he just said that he went into detail about how they like in Germany they expected to win the war, and it made sense. Or like the theme that Hitler had was like it was all the Jews' fault, and it was propaganda that spread throughout. So it made sense for the German people to believe that. So like in their shoes, if they didn't really have any outside media telling them that it wasn't the Jews' fault, then like it made sense for them. So I guess that's kind of what he was getting at. But I mean, it was still wrong, but yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, my guy Richard Evans, he's a British historian, but he's from Europe, but he wrote all of his books were really focused on Germany. So he's an author of 18 books, but 3 of them are about the Third Reich. So he focuses a lot of his energy on Hitler and how he turned pretty much like a vibrant democracy into a one-party state where everyone's just supporting him.
Yeah, mine was also like it was 3 British people. It was Stuart Foster, Andy Pierce, and Alice Pettigrew, but they didn't really, their point was to like target the fact that like students now aren't taught the right thing. So it wasn't so much like trying to believe it, but when they show facts about it, they just try and show that like most of the data that the students are taught is wrong. So that was basically the point.
Charlie,
Yeah.
did you talk about yours yet?
About my author,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to see something about him, and it's not. I can't find it.
Oh, you don't know?
Well, it just said that like about why he like wrote this book. It was just like his thing was kind of like the more and more you read into it, he talks about the Holocaust, but he also like he views that side, but he was also really heavy on like the Armenians and how like that was overlooked in the Holocaust. Like he focused on like the Holocaust, but he also talked about Armenians and how many states and cultures like just like kind of like he even referenced like Holocaust people, like as I mentioned earlier about how they tried to like out victimize each other. So that he was just kind of trying to bring awareness to everything. Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to see if we missed anything. I think a lot of ours, like we all did the Holocaust, but everything else was like we all had different like subtopics on it, which
Mhm.
is kind of cool to see.
Yeah.
I think we got everything. I don't want to choose.